and I do commend this bill to the House.
Okay, well done.
Mojo Mathers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to start by acknowledging the people that died in the Canterbury earthquake. The loss of life is significant. Over 185 people died, and most due to the collapse of just 2 buildings, and a further 164 people were seriously injured. My family were very fortunate to escape direct loss or injury, but like many Cantabrians, we were profoundly affected by the Canterbury earthquake and experienced some very close calls. My daughters and I lost our first home in the September quake, and we ended up at refugees at my mother's house camping in her living room. The second quake struck the day before my youngest daughter turned 15, when she was on a bus with her school friend to go shopping. When she dismounted, a large aftershock brought down a multi-storey brick building right in front of her. My second oldest daughter was inside Avonside Girls' High drama room, rehearsing for a play with other students. When the quake struck, the room was plunged into darkness, and the terrified girls were left scrambling to get out. That building was red stickers and has since been demolished. So personally, I have every motivation to see buildings that are at risk of failure in an earthquake identified and a national strategy developed to ensure that they are strengthened. Safe buildings are essential. There's no dispute about that, and the Green Party strongly supports that outcome. But, and this is the big one, we are strongly opposed to the provision in the bill which enables buildings to be exempted from current building requirement to upgrade disability and fire access when undergoing earthquake strengthening. We see the removal of the current access provision as a serious breach of New Zealand's obligation to eliminate barriers to accessibility under Article 9 of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The Minister says that he wants building owners to be exempt from upgrading disability access because he considered it just too hard an ask on a building owner. That's what he said. And my question is, have you considered just how hard it is on wheelchair users to access services and go about their daily lives in an inaccessible environment? I would suggest to the Minister that the two situations are simply not comparable. And if he doubts that, then he could try spending a week or more in a wheelchair. He might just reconsider. The fact of the matter is that access to buildings is a human right, not an optional extra or a nice to have. Accessibility affects everyone at some point in time, sometimes temporary due to illness or injury or parenthood, but often, especially as we get older, we face permanent limited mobility. And with an ageing population, failing to upgrade disability access represents a missed opportunity to future-proof our buildings. Providing disability access at the same time as strengthening work is undertaken saves building owners money and is cheaper in the long run. At present, there are currently between 15,000 and 24,000 older non-residential and multi-storey residential earthquake-prone buildings in New Zealand that lack disability access. And at the moment, the earthquake strengthening work is one of the very few provisions triggered in the Building Act that requires these older buildings to upgrade disability and fire access. And what this has meant is that the accessibility of public buildings has been progressively improved over time, although for the many, the pace of the upgrades has been frustratingly slow. And it's worth reminding ourselves that the requirement to upgrade access to buildings when undertaking a strengthening has been around for a long time now, and was established after a hard fight by the disability sector, initially in the 1975 Disabled Person Community Welfare Act, and then in the 1991 Building Act. And the Green Party believe that the removal of these hard-won provisions from the Act is a backward move that could potentially see thousands of buildings remain inaccessible to disabled people for the indefinite future, and keeping people with limited mobility locked out of buildings as diverse as art galleries, universities and sports venues. Building owners have already been given plenty of time to plan for when they will upgrade disability access, and it's in our view that they should not be given an exemption at this point in time. They should not be rewarded for poor planning and ducking their responsibility. Lack of access to the built environment is a major constraining factor for many disabled people and their families, greatly restricting our ability to access core services, obtain employment and participate in social activities. The frustrations experienced by many people about inadequate access to buildings is reflected in the many complaints that have been made to the Human Rights Commission about lack of physical access to buildings ranging from movie theatres, museums, educational establishments, hotel accommodation, through to bars, sports venues and art galleries. These are the kind of buildings we're talking about exempting from upgrading disability access. We agree with the Minister for Disability Issues when she said in her letter to the Prime Minister last year that removing current access provisions from the Act sends the wrong message to disabled people and older people. We agree with Minister Turia when she points out that it says that this government does not value all of its citizens equally, that it says that those who are already missing out, those who cannot access many of our buildings, do not matter. We agree with her that the proposed new provision signals to building owners, developers and designers that this government is not serious about wanting a fully accessible built environment where everyone can participate and contribute. We also agree with her that this move is inconsistent with our disability strategy and with our compliance with international standards. In fact, we agree with all of the points that Minister Turia has raised with both the Prime Minister and with the Minister for Buildings in repeated letters last year. In our view, it is shameful that this government is prepared to ignore the plea of their own Minister for Disability in this way. To us, it speaks volumes of this government's real attitude towards disabled people. The message their actions send is that it's okay for disabled people to remain out in the cold, locked out of full participation in society, locked out of employment opportunities, locked out of social and cultural events, locked out of thousands of public buildings. We say it's not okay. Society expects buildings to be both accessible and safe. And we believe that it is both reasonable and practical to aim for that outcome. We should not sacrifice access for the most vulnerable people in our society just to save building owners 1% of the cost of earthquake strengthening work. I'd like to wrap it up by saying that we do recognise that a small number of cases it may be simply impossible or impractical to make certain buildings accessible. And in our view, however, that situation is already covered in the existing bill by the exemption ground of reasonable practicality. So while we're not voting for the bill at present, we would very much like to be able to support it in subsequent stages if the Select Committee can adequately address the concerns of the disability community around this. Thank you.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a great pleasure to take a call on the building earthquake-prone buildings.